Hey everyone, welcome to Saints in Society. This is our last episode of the first season, and today we're going to be talking about Saints in Society. Why did we name the podcast Saints in Society? What do these words mean? Hopefully it's a helpful discussion when thinking through how we as Christians engage with the world around us. So let's dive in.
You are listening to Saints in Society, a podcast focusing on equipping saints to live in and engage with their society. As we dive into the Word and with help from experts in their field, we seek to learn how to engage culture in its terms, but not on them. We believe the gospel speaks to all of life and provides the answers we are all looking for, so we aim to equip saints with the tools necessary to apply the gospel to all areas of life, living as saints in society.
All right, Rick, I got a question for us to get this thing going. If you could get one really cool thing, like not like you could buy a bunch of stuff, but if you could get one thing, one fancy thing, cool thing, expensive thing, you had the money, what would it be?
Okay. My one fancy thing, I can narrow it down to two.
Okay.
And then you can help me choose between those two.
Yeah.
Maybe if we combine our gifts, then we'll be okay with what we choose more.
Yeah, I'll just get your second one and then we can enjoy both.
So I want a truck because we don't have a truck and they come in handy to haul stuff. So I think my one gift would be a truck.
Okay.
Two would be an airplane, specifically because you could fly into places like the Frank Church Wilderness, to Alaska, to do moose hunts, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Would you fly the plane?
You know,
you don't like flying in small planes.
Yeah, here's the thing. I've flown in a small plane once and I said that was a one and done thing. So I don't even know why I chose that, but
you just get a big plane.
Maybe if it was a bigger plane, then I'd be more comfortable doing it. Yeah. Maybe if I was flying it, because I have control issues. Maybe if I was flying it, I'd be more comfortable. But sitting in the passenger seat, being the co-pilot, but actually not being a co-pilot.
Right. Yeah. just doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's stressful.
Yeah. I was also going to say a truck. I have a truck, but a bigger, better truck. But since you said that, I will change my answer to a boat. And I don't really know what kind of boat, but I've just been really wanting a boat lately. I've been doing more fishing and mooching off of other people's boats. And I'm like, man, I told Jenna last night, I think as like my kids grow up, it would be so fun to have a boat and like go out and go fishing and that kind of thing. So
you don't want necessarily like a ski boat. You want like a bass boat or a drift boat or something like that.
Something that's versatile that you could take in the river, a lake, not the ocean. Ocean's scary. I don't want to go out there. But something versatile that could be used for multiple purposes. So probably like a drift boat because you could row it in lakes that are oar only that like don't allow engines, but you can also put an engine on it to zip around places. You couldn't do like any like water skiing or that kind of stuff in a drift boat, but or
even really anchor it and swim out of it.
Yeah. So I don't know. And
that boat sucks, Brad. It's a selfish boat you chose.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a North River jet boat.
Ooh.
They can go in like 2 inches of water in the river. I don't even know if that's an actual fact. I'm just throwing it out there. But I've heard something.
2 inches of water.
Yeah. I know.
That's a car.
You bought it though, man. I was cruising away from that.
Cool. All right. Well, we would be able to do all sorts of travel with our gifts. We could go by road, by air, by water. That's good. All right. Let's dive into our topic for the day. So this is the last episode of our first season of Saints in Society. Because podcasts work by seasons, apparently. And we thought, rather than doing this at the beginning of the season, we'd just wrap it up at the end with, why is the podcast called Saints in Society? What is a saint? What is society? Why did we choose to name it this? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about in this last episode. So Rick, why did we name the podcast Saints in Society?
We named the podcast Saints in Society. Honestly, it was based upon a series our church did in 1 Corinthians where we worked through Paul's letter to the church in Corinth. And in that letter, he addresses them as saints. And what we looked at through that series is what it looks like for saints to engage in their society, what it looks like for them to meet culture, in its terms, but not on its terms. And specifically what I mean by that is we want to be saints that are actively engaged in culture, a part of culture, but we don't have to abide by all the rules of culture. But we also don't want to be saints that are disconnected, living in a holy bubble, removed from culture, not engaging in society. So what does it look like for a saint who has this God-given, grace-given identity as a saint? Because that word means holy one or set apart. The Greek word is hagiazo. And so we have this identity, and it's different from Catholicism, the way that word is used, because saint or sainthood in Catholicism is an arrival place. The way the Bible uses it, though, time and time again, and the Apostle Paul uses it, is a starting place. Saint is the identity given to you when you place your trust and faith in Jesus Christ as a child of God. You, in that moment, are holy and set apart. And so now what does it look like to take your new identity as a holy, set apart child of God and live and engage in the society that God has placed you in?
Can you say more? We do this a lot with words, Christian words in the Bible. We define them with more Christian words. So what does it mean to be holy or set apart? Where do we get our understanding of those things?
Yeah, I think the way that I would try and define what it is to be holy or what it is to be set apart is, I think we can use other synonymous words like pure, like washed, made clean, all of those things. But if we even look back into the Old Testament, we have to know and understand this, that you can't enter into God's holy presence because God is completely pure, completely clean, and in that, completely holy. And you can't take an imperfect sinner who is not set apart, who has not been made holy, who has not been cleansed, and take that person and enter into the presence of a holy God, because you would be consumed. Not because God's evil, but because he is so holy and he's so good that sin cannot dwell in his presence. So what actually happens is when you become holy or set apart, what is taking place is you're being washed and cleansed from all of your sin. So that's being removed. But also what's being added and supplied is the fullness, not a partial, but the fullness of Christ's righteousness. And here's what's amazing. With that word, hagiazo, that same word is used in the Lord's Prayer. So Jesus in the Lord's Prayer says this. He says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." That word hallowed is hagiazo. So holy is your name, God. In 1 Corinthians 6:11, it says you were washed, you were sanctified, and you were justified in the name of Jesus Christ. That word sanctified is hagiazo. So you were sanctified. What does that mean? You are washed, and then you are made holy. The same word is given to you, Brad, that's given to me, that's given to any Christian, that is used to describe God's holiness, which makes sense because you can't have a subpar level of holiness, a partial holiness. You have to have the full holiness of God imputed to you by Christ in order to enter into his presence. And so we're not made like sort of holy. In God's eyes, we possess the holiness, complete holiness of Christ, which gives us full access to enter his presence at any time. So we no longer have to go through ritual washings or cleansings like priests did in the Old Testament or anything like that. We don't have to fear to enter into God's presence of being struck down or anything like that, because we are given the fullness of God's holiness, and he calls us saints. All of this is by grace. We have full, bold access to run into his presence. Does that help? I know it's long-winded.
No, that's great. Follow-up question. If we are holy, if as saints we are considered holy, our sin has been cleansed and removed, and Christ's righteousness has been added to us, we still struggle with sin. Like we still commit sin. And so how do those things fit together, where our identity is as saint and holy one, and yet our actions still sometimes are sinful? Yeah.
And this is great. And this is one of the things that the Protestant Martin Luther wrestled with, which is where his saying, simul iusis et peccator, which is in Latin for that we're simultaneously justified and simultaneously sinful at the same time. And what he was unpacking and what needs to be unpacked is, though we are at the same time completely declared righteous, possessing the full righteousness of Christ, at the same time, we are still in our bodies struggling and wrestling with sin. And we will until the time that Christ returns or we go to be with him. I think the key word here is that we are saints who wrestle with sin. We're no longer sinners wrestling to become saints. And if we don't get that right, then I believe it throws everything off, because what we'll do is we will believe that our core identity is a sinner, and that what we are doing is striving through our holiness, our actions, and our efforts to try to become saints. If we recognize this, that we have this God-given identity as saints, set apart, and now what we're doing is what we're doing is striving to actually live consistent to who God has made us. We're not trying to become this. He's already done that. He's taken care of that. But now what we get to do with a lot of freedom is live into our new identity. But in that process, we are going to mess up time and time again, day after day. But I think the key word there too is that we are wrestling and struggling and battling with our sin and not just giving way to it. I think anyone who is a true saint is going to naturally hate their sin, want to put their sin to death, want to mortify their sin, get rid of their sin, versus, I just want to give way to my sin. And so I think, we are going to continue on this side of Christ's return, struggle with sin, while at the same time, in God's eyes, recognizing that we are completely declared righteous before him. And I mean, Paul had that struggle, right? That's why I love reading our Bibles, because they're so real, so raw, and so genuine. Paul's like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't do the very things I'm supposed to do. I do the things I know I'm not supposed to do. And he goes on to say, wicked man that I am, who's going to save me? And then he says, but thanks be to God. So he gets it. There's this internal wrestle. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. He knows who he is. He knows he's a child of God. He knows he's a saint set apart, but he's still wrestling. The key word, again, I think, is wrestling.
Yeah. I think that's why we see both past, present, and future language for salvation in the New Testament. We've been saved.
Yep.
We're being saved, and a day will come when we will be saved. And I think the past, the present, the future language used to talk about our salvation is getting at that we're saints. We're still struggling with sin, and there's still a process of sanctification, which is becoming holy, taking place. And there will be a day when we are glorified and we will not sin anymore. All that's wrapped up in our salvation and our justification that has happened, is happening, and one day will happen in fullness. So.
Yeah, and I don't even know how this necessarily fits into what you just said, but oftentimes we think of sanctification as progressive sanctification. In other words, what you just said, this act of continuing to grow in the likeness of Christ. Oftentimes when the New Testament uses the word sanctification, it is talking about a past event. So something that's happened in the past where you've been completely washed, completely cleansed, completely set apart. And I think the more that we look back to that, and the more that we stare at the sanctification, the once and for all time cleansing that Christ has given us, the more we actually grow into Christ's likeness, the more we are actually grow into our sanctification. I think the more inward staring, fruit gazing, and all that sort of stuff can actually start to produce the opposite of sanctification, can produce you being self-focused, narcissistic and stuff. And so I know you quote this book because you've liked it and your wife has liked it, but Matt Papa's book, what's the title of it?
Look and Live.
Look and Live. Yeah. So I think the premise of that book, and even as we think about sanctification, is looking to the fact that once and for all time that Christ has already sanctified us, already set us apart, already made us holy. The truest thing about Brad and Rick is that we are completely clean before God, and God will never look at us and see us as dirty, as gross, as vile, as sick, but he sees us as completely washed, clean, pure, and holy. And that's the only way God for eternity is going to look at us. Like, I think that's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. So that's the word saint. And unpacking that a little bit, let's talk a little bit about the word in. I'm just kidding. Let's talk a little bit about the word. We're going to go letter by letter. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about society. You interchange some words, society, culture. Yeah. You could throw civilization, kingdoms, language in there and all that kind of stuff. So when we're talking about saints living in, engaging with society, what do we mean by society?
Yeah. When I think about society, I think about the place that we live, and specifically the people that are in those places. And so when I'm talking about society, I'm not talking about this just random thing that's floating around out there.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about society, I'm talking about people and talking about relationships. How are we engaging the people that God has placed in and around our lives in the society that we live in? You and I live in Lane County. When we go to the gym, I see that as engaging in our society. Whenever we go and do our hobbies, our kids' soccer games, anything like that, all of those things are opportunities. Our neighbors are in our society. And so I feel like any place the Christian goes, we have an opportunity to engage the society that God has placed us in. But yes, society is not some, I don't know, ethereal thing floating around out in the atmosphere or buildings. It's people. So how do we engage people? And how do we meet them again in their terms? Because everyone has a narrative. Everyone has something they're believing. And so how are we engaging them in what they're believing and then showing them how the hope of the gospel is better?
Yeah.
So
I think that's really helpful. When we say words like society, culture, the world, I know what comes to my mind is not people necessarily, but like this ambiguous, like, I don't know, thing,
Yeah.
But when you break it down to like really personal and interpersonal terms of like, this society is people, I think that's a lot more helpful to think through.
I think the other thing too is we're in a pretty unique spot, and I don't know if it's, just unique to us. I'm sure there's other places like it. But as I think about the society here and I think about the people, it's kind of helpful for me in my mind to divide Lane County with like two different people groups, because the way that you're going to engage the society, the people in Springfield is going to look different from Eugene. The conversations you're going to have. Springfield just is more of a blue collar, like rural type town. And so I think knowing how to engage those types of people, or asking the Spirit to do that, or asking the Spirit to help you to engage those type of people is going to be different from how I engage people in Eugene. That is, more academic. It is, it's a college town. There's a heavy university influence and stuff. And so it's just going to look different, which is why Paul says, I became all things to all men. I don't think that means that he was a chameleon, that he's having to shift and put on all these different hats and stuff like that. I believe it's that Paul knew how to talk to a Gentile and Paul knew how to talk to a Jew. He knew things that, like, I don't think he was running into a Jewish conversation and being like, hey, how's the pulled pork? You guys having bacon and eggs for breakfast, Right. And I don't think he was running over to the Gentiles saying, how'd the circumcision go?
Yeah.
He knew how to engage people. And that's what Paul means by I became all things to all people. And saints in society is learning to engage people, being good question askers. You look at Jesus, he's an incredible question asker. You look at Socrates and the Socratic method, they're asking questions. And I think just learning people, studying people, engaging people, asking people questions, getting to know people and all that stuff is one of the ways we can engage them in society. But ultimately, what Christians get to do is bring the greatest hope to the greatest message in the world, the gospel.
Yeah.
This week's spotlight is 514 Vineyards. 514 Vineyards is located on the southeastern slopes of Northwest Eugene, and it's owned by Tom and Marie Cockler. Tom and Marie took over the vineyard with the plans simply to grow grapes to sell to other vineyards. And they sell grapes to King Estate, to Iris, they sell to Willamette Vineyards, and to other vineyards. But they soon realized that they also wanted to create a label and a business of their own. So they started to reserve 10% of the grapes to make their own label. And that label today is 514 Vineyards. They are great people, hard workers who have grown and developed this vineyard into what it is today. They have different types of wine. They have Pinot Noirs, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and Rieslings. And the reason they're able to have these different types of wine is because they have 5 different soil types there. And not to mention they are a LIV certified vineyard, which means that they're environmentally safe and socially safe as well. And so we're thankful for them, thankful for their business, but also their winemaker as well is a man named Drew Voigt who takes winemaking seriously. And he does a good job. From someone who's not a big wine drinker or doesn't like a lot of wine, I like 514's wines. I like their Pinot Noirs. They're bigger, I would say richer wines. And not just that, but they have a great environment, a tasting room, place for families to go and hang out. And I know that personally because our family goes there. We're also members there. They have wine memberships as well. And the wine memberships are oftentimes reserved for special events and whatnot. So I highly encourage to go out and check them out. I highly encourage their membership. My wife and I just went to a tasting there where we got to try oysters and all sorts of stuff with wine pairing. They have country concerts there that are a blast, even if you don't like country music. So they're just a great business. They're great people. They work hard. They take wine making seriously, and it's a great environment, great atmosphere. So I can't encourage you guys enough to go check it out. And when you do, let them know that you heard about them through our podcast.
Do you think that Christians should try to change society.
Yes.
Okay, what do you mean?
I don't think you can, I don't think that you can engage society without some underlining motive to want to change society. And what I mean by that is simply this. Again, I don't think that I can truly engage people without wanting to change people. However, I'm not devastated if someone's not going to change, nor do I give up on someone if they're not going to change. Like, I don't stop loving people. But here's what I mean. If I knew people who had terminal cancer and they had a short time left, and someone came to me and said, hey, I have a cure. Like, if you take this, the cancer's gone and it gets rid of this disease in your body and then you can live. Would I not, out of the most genuine spot of love, try and convince these people that, hey, you need this. You need this. And how much more so? Sin is a disease. Again, it's not something floating around in the universe. It's something that lives inside of us. It is a disease that we can't fix or cure ourselves, but the gospel can. Again, it cleanses us, washes us, renews us. The gospel is the one thing that has the power to give us a new heart, transform us from the inside out. Why would I not want to take the one message to people, to give them the one relationship that people need, to be restored and reconciled to God, to be infinitely loved, to be cared for, to have the God of the universe love them, delight in them? Like, it would seem bizarre to me that if I really believe this, that I wouldn't want people to experience this, which experiencing it would mean the change would happen in their lives.
Yeah.
But I don't think, again, I'm going in and trying to force change. I don't think that I'm a closer trying to close a car deal or anything like that. I think that I get to love people patiently, present the gospel to them, continue to love them, even if they reject it, which I have many friends I've shared the gospel with many times, and they're still atheists or they still don't believe it. That hasn't made me go, well, since I can't change them, I'm out. It just leads me to say, pray for them and trust in God to do that. Does that make sense? Maybe you disagree with me. Do you think that we try to change society? Like, I want to see society flourish.
Totally.
And if the God of the Bible has told us how humans can flourish and we can have human flourishing, why would we not want to change the world from their perspective of the lies they're believing that is coming from Satan, where they're being deceived, to actually go, hey, do you know that God loves you? And in fact, he knows, as the creator of humanity, how we're actually going to experience life. He knows how sex was designed, or he designed sex, so he knows how it's going to flourish, how we're going to experience it to the fullest, you know? And so, of course, I think we'd want that.
Sure. Yeah. No, I would agree with you. I think, there's been many books written on what does the Christian's engagement with culture be, right? You have extreme one way, like Amish throughout history, where we're going to completely and totally remove ourselves from evil culture and have our own holy huddle bubble kind of thing.
Yeah.
You have the extreme the other way, where maybe you're playing secular songs at church or something, or you start to look so much like society that there's nothing distinguishable about Christian and non-Christian. I think there's some balance in the middle, but I think a lot of times those conversations are talking about society as something other than people. And so if we're defining society as the people in our lives and that, like, we've been placed in their lives, then yeah, absolutely. I think we should want to change them, or want them to change. We can't change them. We should want them to change, but then it's how, and what do we want to change them with or to? And that's with the gospel.
Yeah.
The only thing that truly will change, like you said, people from the inside out, is the good news of the gospel of what Christ has done for us. So no, I would agree with you. I think, it's a bit of a loaded conversation. We could probably do a whole podcast on of how do Christians engage culture. But when you put it in personal terms, it's just, how are you engaging with the people in your life? Well, hopefully in loving relationships that point them towards Christ, with conversations that explain the gospel to them. So I think it's probably more simple than we sometimes make it when we think of society as people. Yeah.
And as we engage society, I think, be ourselves. I don't need to try to pretend that I'm crazy academic if I'm around academics. I don't need to pretend that I know something about, falling timber if I'm around lumberjacks or something like that. It's going to be pretty obvious I'm a poser real quick, So I think be ourselves, love people. And again, when we say change society, change people, my end goal is not, I'm definitely pro-life, believe the Bible is pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not trying to convert someone from pro-choice to pro-life. I'm also not trying to convert someone from an Arminian to a Calvinist. I'm not trying to convert someone believe in God's design for marriage between male and female, man and woman. That's the traditional view of marriage. That's God's design. I'm not trying to convert someone from a homosexual position to a traditional view of marriage. I want to present Jesus to people. I want to let them know that the gospel meets them where they're at, but then it doesn't leave them where they're at. Yeah. Because we could have a whole society filled with people that are pro-life, that don't cuss, don't swear, know how to follow all the rules, and they're going straight to hell. Because ultimately, it's not all the things that we're doing. It's, are we placing our trust and faith in Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Are we having a heart that's transformed by the gospel?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, maybe to close, I think it's important then we have this identity as saints that we should devote our lives to exploring, that as we understand the height and depth and breadth and width of God's love for us, we actually grow in our understanding of his power. That changes and shapes us. But then also I think we have a responsibility of learning society as well and learning people and being culturally aware enough to bring the gospel into those things. So do you have maybe any like tips or wisdom, pastoral advice for people, and how do we go about this engagement in theology? I think was it Spurgeon who said you should always have the Bible in one hand and newspaper in the other. And I don't think he meant you're like waiting for the end times predictions. It was more like know what's going on in the world and know what people are thinking and believing and feeling and what kind of existential crises they're having so that you can apply the good news of the gospel in it. So do you have any thoughts on how we as saints can begin the learning of our society so we can engage it well?
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks, folks. We'll.
Yeah, I think just what you said there. Obviously, we don't have newspapers anymore, but we can be aware of what's going on in our world around us through the news. We all have smartphones. Our smartphones give us updates. And I think those are great ways to stay connected to what's going on in the world. I think that unless you're Amish, as you said, and living in a bubble, for the most part, you're going to know a lot of the hot topics that are going on in and around your city where God has placed you. But I also think not being a lazy Christian. Like, I don't know how else to say that, but disciple, which is also our identity, means student or learner. It's always a bummer to me when people are like, oh, I want to go do a mission trip, or like I want to go do these like short-term mission trips. It's like, and then they do this and they're going to pick up books like Neighboring Faiths or learning about, Islam, learning about Judaism and stuff like that. And like they take this time to study and learn as they're going to go do this trip for 7 days. But it seems like we're lazy to study and learn the society and culture that God has placed us in for the other 355 days of the year.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, we're going to go study in this, but are you taking time to study and learn about your culture? Are you reading books? Are you a student of the word ultimately? But then are you a student of other books? Are you, I mean, there's books I could recommend, like Sam Chan's book, Evangelism in a Skeptical World, but like these are helping us to be, I think, winsome communicators and learn how to engage society and engage people. But I think sometimes, being honest, it is laziness, and it's laziness in the sense of like, we just love our comfort. And so it's easy to just stay at home, stay around our Christians. We know how they talk, we know the language. So I think it's going to take, as we say this probably in every podcast, it's going to take some dying to ourselves to actually see the need and the importance that there's people in the world that need the hope of Jesus Christ. Are we willing to get in the mess of their lives? Yeah. So
that's good. Thanks for the conversation, Rick. Hopefully this was helpful. And understanding why we named the podcast what we did. Helpful in understanding who we are as saints and what it means to live in and engage with our society. This is the last episode of season 1 of Saints in Society. We're going to take a little bit of a break so we can plan for the next season and hopefully have some relevant episodes coming out then. Thank you for sticking with us this whole time. Thanks for listening. If you ever have any questions or would like us to do a podcast on something, we're always available. The contact info's in the show notes, wherever you're listening to or watching this. And so feel free to reach out. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. We're learning a lot about how to do podcasts. So
thanks for listening. Yeah. Stay tuned for season 2.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.